Okay, good afternoon on this rainy Sunday. This one I have the wind yet. My name is Evan Weiner. We're going back 32 years, so you might have had kids at that point at home 32 years ago, and you might have been worried about this Operation Desert Storm, which would eventually kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait. Rodney King was beaten up by LA cops. It's my father-in-law with Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson was accused of rape in 1991. The Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings with Anita Hill. If you look very closely at this picture, Michael Jordan has hair. That's Michael Jordan, again with my father-in-law, and he won the championship that year. Magic Johnson announces that he has AIDS, or the HIV virus. Hasta la vista, baby. Schwarzenegger, he said he was coming back, he came back. Yugoslavia, breaking up is hard to do. That is my wife, and we were over in Dubrovnik in Croatia, and behind that is a war-torn area. The USSR is no more. Lithuania gets independence. And we start with Schwarzenegger and Operation Desert Shield. And it's the United States-led coalition, and they're going to kick Saddam Hussein and Iraq out of Kuwait. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered the occupation of Kuwait in an attempt to gain control of the lucrative oil supply of the Middle East and pay off a huge debt incurred from Kuwait. Saddam accused Kuwait of slant drilling, or sucking oil from the Iraqi side. He used that charge as part of his justification for invading the emirate. Kuwait denied ever drilling in Iraqi soil. Operation Desert Storm was the first major foreign crisis for the United States after the unofficial end of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And some of you might remember when you were young like me that you used to dive under desks to protect yourself from nuclear fallout. On August 2nd, 1990, the one-time American ally Saddam led a well-equipped Iraqi army into Kuwait, a major supplier of oil to the United States. The Iraqi leader was also repeatedly violated United Nations resolutions, so the U.S. had UN support in responding to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. And there were some of the troops from Operation Desert Shield, which turned into Desert
My
Storm.
son-in-law was there.
Your son-in-law was there? He was in Kuwait?
He was in the water.
He was there. That's 32 years ago now, almost 33 years ago. President George Bush's foreign policy team forged an international coalition consisting of NATO allies in the Middle East countries of Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Egypt to oppose the Iraqi aggression. Soviet Union, which is on its dying legs here, didn't commit any troops, but it joined the United States in condemning Iraq, its longtime client state. But there is a problem with Israel. How do you keep Israel out of the conflict, because you don't want to get the Arabs upset at you, but how do you convince Israel it's okay to take some bombs? It's okay, it's perfectly fine. So George Bush has to do that balancing act. How do you keep Israel on the sideline when they have every right to defend themselves? Every right to defend themselves. Well, the foreign policy team from Bush's from his administration forged an international coalition, and that included countries like Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Egypt, although Egypt was an ally of Israel by this point. The Soviet Union doesn't have any troops there. So Operation Desert Shield, and you got to deal with the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Somehow, somebody in the Bush administration was able to convince the Israelis stay out of this conflict. Even though it's right next door to you, stay out of it. The Bush administration assured the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir that the U.S. armed forces would, within days, eliminate the danger of Scud, the Scuds, the missiles that were supplied by the Soviet Union, attacks against Israel, while Israeli participation might break up this coalition that Bush had put together and cause all kind of problems. So do us a favor, take a couple scud hits if need be, if you have to, but stay out of it. Stay out of it and we'll do right by you. Should the United States not be successful in eliminating the scud threat to Israel, the U.S. will say, okay, go ahead, do what you have to do. And this is Operation Desert Shield. Iraq annexed Kuwait. The U.S.-led coalition of 24 nations posted more than 900,000 troops in the region, most stationed on the Saudi-Iraqi border. And here is the President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, announcing its move from Desert Shield to Desert Storm in January. It's January 16th, 1991, and Bush announced the start of what would be called Operation Desert Storm. Military operation to expel occupying Iraqi forces from Kuwait, which had invaded the country months earlier. For weeks, the U.S.-led coalition of 24 nations had positioned more than 900,000 troops in the region, most of them stationed on the Saudi-Iraqi border. United Nations declaration said, get out by January 15th to Saddam or else. But there was no action from Iraq, so the coalition forces began a 5-week bombardment of Iraqi command and control targets from air and sea. And this is, your son-in-law probably saw this, the explosions from bombs from the Operation Desert Storm flyers.
That's when he went to
Yeah. Despite widespread fears that Saddam would use chemical weapons, a ground invasion followed in February. Coalition forces swiftly drove Iraq from Kuwait, advancing into Iraq and reaching a ceasefire within 100 hours, leaving Saddam Hussein in power. While coalition casualties were in the hundreds, Iraqi losses numbered in the tens of thousands. So the United States is at war, but there is also one other consideration, the national holiday, which is not a holiday, called the Super Bowl. Should we or should we not play the Super Bowl? Super Bowl 25. Well, we want to be as normal as possible, but can we safeguard this from a terrorist attack? And that's the question of the Super Bowl. On January 14th, 2 days before the invasion, there was a report that the National Football League owners were considering postponing the January 27th Super Bowl if a war broke out in the Persian Gulf. The league did issue a statement that, as of now, January 14th, the championship game will proceed as scheduled. It was in Tampa. But the NFL did reserve the right to change its plan. The American Football League champions, the Buffalo Bills, and the National Football League conference champion, the New York Giants, it's a game to decide the National Football League championship for the 1990 season. The Giants would defeat the Bills by a score of 20-19, their second Super Bowl, but win. But there were other considerations that might have made the game somewhat secondary. To some, the most outstanding performance in that game or in that event was Whitney Houston's rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, or security concerns because the United States was at war. I don't know how many of you remember Whitney Houston singing at the Super Bowl that year. Now, there was a debate. Did she do it live or did she do it on tape? If you remember the rendition, it is considered one of the greatest renditions of the national anthem at any sports event globally, Whitney Houston. Question was it live or did she fake it? What do you think if you remember? If you remember. Now, that's a long time ago. Well, anyway, I have a friend, his name is Jim Steeg, because I used to cover sports, and he worked with the National Football League. And he was the guy who was the head of the Super Bowl planning. Not the game, so to speak, but all the events around the game. So Jim Steeg once told me this. It's early January. Our coordinator of Super Bowl pregame activities, Bob Best, produced a recording of the Florida Orchestra for the national anthem producer Ricky Minor. A week later, Minor flew to Los Angeles to have Whitney record the vocal track. Amazingly, it was in one take. She lip sank. She didn't sing it live. She lip sank. Now, in Tampa, okay, you have the great Whitney Houston rendition of the Star Spangled Banner. These guys are all over the place in Tampa. Security. Now, today, the Super Bowl is a level 1 security event. And the only event that gets more security during the course of a normal year is the presidential State of the Union address before Congress. In years where a president is inaugurated, and the next one will be in 2025, that too precedes the Super Bowl in terms of security. So it'll be the presidential inauguration in Washington, the State of the Union address, and then the Super Bowl. It's a what's called a SEER Level 1 event, highest security going. Heavy blanket of security was necessitated by the Persian Gulf War. The combat phase of the war, Operation Desert Storm, had commenced on January 17th, January 16th in the United States. With the United States at war, a security force of more than 500 federal, state, and law enforcement officials from 22 agencies was deployed to keep everybody safe. This has not changed. This year's Super Bowl is in Las Vegas. The United States security apparatus has been on the ground in Las Vegas for now, this will be in February, for the last 22 months, trying to make sure that the game is safe. You're spending a lot of money, your tax dollars, a lot of money in securing the Super Bowl. Highest security alert. All 73,813 fans on game day in Tampa went through metal detectors. Any vehicle that entered the stadium parking lots was examined. Armed anti-terrorist police in camouflage and black uniforms patrolled the stadium roof. This was a serious deal, but they got the game on. Meanwhile, back in the Middle East, Operation Desert Storm. The liberation of Kuwait was a U.S.-led military operation to retake Kuwait from Iraq after the massive air campaign between February 24th and February 28th. U.S. and coalition troops entered to find the Iraqis surrendering en masse. However, pockets of resistance existed, particularly at the Kuwait International Airport, where Iraqi troops, seemingly unaware of the retreat order issued to them, continued to fight, resulting in a fierce battle over the airport itself. The majority of the fighting took place in Iraq rather than Kuwait. After 4 days of fighting, all Iraqi troops were expelled from Kuwait, ending nearly a 7-month occupation of Kuwait by Iraq. And here it is, the surrender, the end. The majority of the fighting, like I said, took place in Iraq. On February 28th, George Bush announced the suspension of the Gulf War hostilities about 100 hours after the ground offensive began. Same time, he confronted Saddam Hussein with a series of uncompromising demands which reflected in the overwhelming Allied victory achieved since Operation Desert Storm was launched 6 weeks earlier. Tonight, this is Bush talking, tonight the Kuwaiti flag flies above the capital of a free and sovereign nation. Bush said the de facto ceasefire was contingent on Iraqi agreement not to attack coalition forces or to continue Scud missile assaults. If Iraq failed to comply, then the war would resume. This war is now behind us, the president said. Ahead of us is the task of achieving a potentially historic peace in the Middle East, something that is still elusive. But the Iraqis did not leave quietly. They decided to put the Kuwaiti oil fields on fire. There were something between 605 and 732 oil fires, an unspecific number of oil-filled low-lying areas such as oil takes and fire trenches. This was the scorched earth policy retreating from Kuwait as the U.S.-led coalition forces got involved with Iraq. The fires started in January and February and the first oil well fires were extinguished in early April. The last one was capped on November 6th. And there's a picture of the fires. Rodney King. And Rodney King would open up in 1991, 92, 93, a series of questions, again about police brutality and how African Americans were treated by police. And he's beaten up in 1991. He's 25 years old. He's driving on the Los Angeles highway on March the 3rd, and officers chase him on an 8-mile high-speed chase. They pull him over for speeding. He gets out of the car, but he resists arrest and at one point threw the officers off his back. Officers seeking to subdue him fire the stun gun at him and brutally beat him. Well, these are the days of the initial flip phones and phones that you can record things on. And, well, this is all recorded, although this is on a camcorder. A nearby resident, a guy by the name of George Holliday, filmed the entire encounter with a camcorder. Camcorders are all of a sudden around. And the video was sent out, it's made in public demand and ends up on television and people see it. The Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates announced that the 4 officers involved would be disciplined for use of excessive force and that 3 would face criminal charges. The LAPD initially charged King with felony evading, but later dropped the charge. On his release, King spoke to reporters from his wheelchair with his injuries evident. A broken right leg in a cast, his face badly cut and swollen, bruises on his body and a burn area to his chest where he was jolted with a stun gun. Well, people have the images. The images go around the world. And it's not done by professional journalism. All of a sudden, you have people with camcorders and eventually phones who begin to take videos of what is happening. It's 1957 all over again. As far as civil rights leaders are concerned, that's when TV got to Little Rock, Arkansas, and was able to watch the Little Rock 9 high school students try to enter Central High School. Described how he felt. He said his hands spread out. He slowly tried to move, not to make any stupid moves, being hit across the face by a billy club and shot. He said he was scared for his life as they drew guns on him. The Los Angeles District Attorney subsequently charged 4 police officers, including 1 sergeant, with assault and the use of excessive force. Well, the mayor of Los Angeles at this point is Tom Bradley, and he creates a commission. He wants to know what happened with Rodney King. It's called the Independent Commission on the Los Angeles Police Department, also known as the Christopher Commission, named after Warren Christopher, who was part of Bill Clinton's administration. It was created to conduct a full and fair examination of the structure and operation of the LAPD, including its recruitment, its training practice, internal disciplinary system, and citizen complaint system. Meanwhile, in Indianapolis, this guy, Mike Tyson, is arrested and accused of rape. Some of you might know that I'm a journalist. And well, you wouldn't know this, but I went to the police station in New Jersey after Mike Tyson allegedly beat up Robin Givens. It was in Baskin Ridge, New Jersey. And I had to go into the police station and I had to interview the officer that arrested him. I also went to the hospital by the George Washington Bridge after Mike Tyson hit a tree with his car and people thought he was committing suicide. So I had to go there and I had to talk to people from Mike Tyson's camp. So I was fully immersed in Mike Tyson's life in 1988, 89, 90, 91, and I know some of the things that were said about Mike Tyson and what he did and why he didn't get what was thought to be the best defense possible. Anyway, he's accused of rape in Indianapolis. He was in Indianapolis on July 17, 1991 for the Indiana Black Expo at the invitation of the Expo President Charles Williams. He met Miss Rhode Island, Desiree Washington, at a rehearsal for the Miss Black America pageant. She accompanied Tyson back to his hotel room, where in the early hours of July 19th, she said Tyson raped her. Tyson said it was consensual sex. 3 days later, Washington went to police. What she had to say resulted in Tyson facing charges of rape and related offenses. And this is Desiree Washington. She's about 18 years old at the time, and she's a beauty pageant contestant. Tyson would be indicted by a grand jury in September and would face a trial in 1992. Well, Clarence Thomas is still on the Supreme Court of the United States. But back in 1991, well, there was confirmation hearings after George H.W. Bush put his name in front of the Senate as the next Supreme Court justice. He nominated Clarence Thomas for the seat 5 days after the civil rights icon Thurgood Marshall announced he was retiring after 24 years. Thomas, despite an impressive resume, had served as a federal judge for only 19 months. By the way, you do not need a law license to be on the Supreme Court. Anybody could be on the Supreme Court in theory. None of the American Bar Association's Standing Committee for the Federal Judiciary members rated him well qualified. Near the end of the hearing, a former employee of Thomas's, Anita Hill, came forward with sensational allegations. Not my word, that was the media, their analysis of all of that at that point. Sensational allegations of sexual harassment. Her testimony took 3 days, and it was on TV. The nation was shocked. They were transfixed, and they were deeply divided. Do we believe Anita Hill, or don't we believe Anita Hill? And there is Anita Hill. In October of that year, Hill testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee where she recounted Thomas's alleged sexual harassments. The hearings, which were televised, created a media circus because our media, I'm part of it. Our media doesn't know what it's doing most of the time. They do no research at all. In fact, I was doing something on Social Security today. In reading the original provisions of Social Security, I'm thinking all these people want to go to Social Security. Why don't you just go to Google and read the original provisions of Social Security and then ask a question? No, here's the deal with TV, and it's also on the radio. Is it good TV, or is it journalism? Is it good radio, or is it journalism? We want good TV. So they had great TV with this. Creates a media circus and propelled Hill into the spotlight. During her questioning, a number of senators accused her of lying. You're up there, you're lying. Well, how do we know you lied? And where are the media people going to those senators and said, how about giving us proof that she lied? Don't expect that from the Washington media. They're not going to do it. And raised doubts about her sincerity and her sanity. Her sanity. Thomas later denied the allegations, accusing the committee of a high-tech lynching. Although other people, other women, repeatedly could have supported Hill's testimony, the Senate committee never called those other women. Again, if I'm in Washington, I'm covering this, I asked Joe Biden, who was on the committee, why didn't you cover other people? Why didn't you get them up there? In the end, Thomas was confirmed, 52-48. The Delaware Senator, Joe Biden, voted in favor of Thomas getting a seat on the Supreme Court bench. Thomas was sworn in, and there he is taking the oath of office, and there is George H.W. Bush there. This is Ginny Thomas, and that's Barbara Bush as he takes the oath of office, or the oath to get onto the Supreme Court. So the hearings polarized Americans. Some believe that Hill was simply a scorned woman or an attention seeker, while others found her treatment by the Senate committee demeaning and sexist. Hill's testimony was also credited with raising awareness of workplace sexual harassment. This was only 32 years ago. Gotta be the shoes. Michael Jordan. How many of you in here know who Michael Jordan is? All right? How many of you never watched a basketball game? Michael Jordan transcended basketball. He was a global celebrity. Why? He sold shoes, sold Gatorade, he sold underwear. He was more than a basketball player. He was a pitchman. And he was a likable pitchman because he was put in that position to be liked. Be like Mike. Must be the shoes. Be like Mike. Gotta be the shoes. Michael Jordan was a global icon, selling Nike sneakers or selling Gatorade. Air Jordan was a shoe brand. Very expensive sneakers, but people bought it because it was Air Jordan. But he was never on the National Basketball Association championship team as a member of the Chicago Bulls until 1991. Jordan's Bulls beat Magic Johnson's Los Angeles Lakers 4-1. He now had a championship ring to go with his Nike and Gatorade and other things that he was selling, brand status. Meanwhile, Magic Johnson has AIDS. And that was kind of a shocking news conference. I remember I was driving down to Washington and I heard it as I was on the New Jersey Turnpike driving down to Washington. Magic Johnson has AIDS. In those days, it was thought AIDS was a death sentence. That's it. Once you got it, it was all over. He has AIDS, but he has the HIV virus, which causes AIDS. It's November 7th, and the Los Angeles Lakers basketball superstar Earvin Magic Johnson retired after announcing he had tested positive for the HIV, the virus, which causes AIDS. He's 32 years old, and he learned that he had the virus a few weeks earlier after a test administered by a life insurance company. Johnson vowed to become a spokesman for AIDS prevention. I just want to make it clear, first of all, I do not have the AIDS disease, which people have said, no, you have it. But as research showed later on, no, you have the virus that causes AIDS. My wife, Cookie, her name was Cookie, I've met a few times, is fine. She tested negative. I hope that Americans everywhere will understand better today that AIDS is not a remote disease that strikes only someone else. Dr. Louis W. Sullivan, Secretary of Health and Human Services, said in a statement, everyone must be aware that the AIDS epidemic can reach them. I'm very heartened by the announcement that in the months and years ahead, Magic Johnson will help carry a life-saving message to young people across our nation. Well, there's a major concert tragedy in Salt Lake City. A couple people get killed at this concert at the Salt Palace. It's January 18th. Tragedy struck during an AC/DC concert, Salt Lake City, Utah. AC/DC, the band, had barely launched into its opening song, Thunderstruck, when a sea of fans rushed toward the stage. The Salt Palace booked the show as a general admission event. No assigned seating. More than 13,000 people were in attendance, and the free-for-all for premium spots led to a mad dash for the front row. The stampede quickly got out of control with bodies crunched against one another. 3 teens died as a result of injuries sustained in the chaos. I'll be back. He promised that he was going to be back. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, he made that promise in Terminator, the first movie, in 1984. Anybody remember seeing Terminator? You did see Terminator. These were men's films, like Conan the Barbarian. I didn't think women went to see Arnold Schwarzenegger because they were all guy-oriented movies, right? Like the Terminator. Well, he promised, I'll be back. Well, he was back. Terminator 2. Judgment Day. It's a sequel to The Terminator from 1984, a film that had significantly impacted Schwarzenegger's career. And people went to see Arnold. Remember they called him Arnold? Terminator 2 Judgment Day was estimated to have grossed somewhere between $519 and $521 million, making it the year's highest grossing film, and at the time, the third highest grossing film ever. Remember this catchword, hasta la vista, baby? Remember, hasta la vista, baby? Or see you later. It became a really popular catchphrase, uttered by Schwarzenegger's character. Yugoslavia starts breaking apart. Oh, missed it there. Okay, June 25th, Croatia and Slovenia were two of the competent republics of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, and they declared their independence. The Yugoslav army briefly intervened in Slovenia, but it withdrew after 10 days, effectively confirming Slovenia's separation. Slovenia decided to leave in the last couple of days of 1990. The Serb minority in Croatia declared its own independence for the republic and its desire to join Serbia, sparking violence between armed militias, and this is the beginning of the problems in the former Yugoslavia, which would include the United States bombing Kosovo later on. Albania throws out communists, and it's the fall of communism in Albania. It's the last such event in Europe outside the Soviet Union. It starts in December 1990 with student demonstrations in the capital, Tirana. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of Labor of Albania allowed political pluralism on December 11, 1990, and the largest opposition party, the Democratic Party, was founded the next day. March elections left the Party of Labor in power, but a general strike and urban opposition led to the formation of a stability government that included non-communists. And now we got the collapse of the Soviet Union. And they were scary when you were young, weren't they? Remember, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. The Cold War, the Russians are poisoning the mind of our children through television shows and movies. Back in the 1950s, you dove under tables because you were worried about Megatron bomb, nuclear bomb being dropped on you. Well, the Soviet Union was coming apart at the seams by 1991. Conditions in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union changed rapidly following Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev's decision to loosen the Soviet influence on Warsaw Pact allies in 1989. The countries of Eastern Europe created an independent democratic momentum and movement that led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 and the overthrow of communist rule throughout Eastern Europe. The Soviets themselves would have an election on March 14, 1990. There's Gorbachev. And they were electing a president for the next 5 years. The office of the presidency of the Soviet Union was established earlier in 1990. The election was uncontested, with Gorbachev, then the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the only candidate. On March 15, 1990, the day after the election, at the meeting of the Congress of the People's Deputies, Gorbachev took office as president. March 24, 1990, 10 days after the election, Gorbachev appointed his cabinet. But things are vastly different in the Soviet Union, and that's Boris Yeltsin, who is the former mayor of Moscow. Yeltsin, Gorbachev faced conflicting internal political pressures. Yeltsin and the pluralist movements advocated democratization and rapid economic reforms, while the hard-line communist elite said, no reforms. Let's keep the Soviet Union the Soviet Union. And Yeltsin would become really powerful. On May 29, 1990, the parliament of the Russian SFSR elected Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Republic within the USSR, against Gorbachev's wishes. In his new role, Yeltsin publicly supported the right of Soviet republics to greater autonomy within the Soviet Union, took steps to give the Russian Republic more autonomy, and declared himself in favor of market-oriented economy and multi-party system. In July, Yeltsin quit the Communist Party. Don't laugh when I tell you this. This is St. Petersburg. See what's on top of St. Petersburg? McDonald's. McDonald's. What did the Soviets and the Russians want? McDonald's hamburgers. They wanted McDonald's. And McDonald's opens in 1990 on January 31st. 38,000 people in Moscow stand in lines wanting a McDonald's hamburger or a cheeseburger. I haven't had a McDonald's hamburger in 45 years. I don't know what they were standing in line for, but that's what they wanted. We want McDonald's. I guess they deserved a break today. It broke company records. The Soviet Union is changing. Western influences are taking over, and the old way of life is disappearing. By January 1st, 1991, the USSR is hanging by a thread. On January 1st, Soviet Union was the largest country in the world, had 8,650,000 square miles, nearly 1/6 of the Earth's land surface. It had a population of 290 million people, and 100 distinct nationalities live within its borders. Soviet Union had an arsenal of tens of thousands of nuclear weapons, sphere of influence, and they were able to spread their fear through the Warsaw Pact nations throughout Eastern Europe. But the country is failing. It's failing quickly. The Allies throughout communist governments, the Iron Curtain had fallen. And the Warsaw Pact, shh, be quiet, don't leak any secrets, loose lips and all, it's falling apart. Actually, I have those magnets on my wall in my house. There were 4 of them. The Warsaw Pact, formerly the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, was a collective defensive treaty signed in Warsaw, Poland, between the Soviet Union and 7 other Eastern Bloc socialist republics of Central and Eastern Europe in May 1955 during the Cold War. And here they are. It was Albania and Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and the Soviet Union. Those were the Warsaw Pact nations. Pact began to start to unravel. The revolutions of 1989 through the Eastern Bloc in Eastern Europe, beginning with the Solidarity movement in Poland, its electoral success in June 1989, and the Pan-European picnic in August 1989. East Germany withdrew from the pact following German reunification in 1990. February 25th, meeting in Hungary, the pact was declared at an end by the defense and foreign ministers of the 6 remaining states. So it's gone. The Warsaw Pact is gone. On July 1st in Prague, the Czechoslovakian President Václav Havel formally ended the 1955 Warsaw Treaty Organization of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, and so disestablished the Warsaw Treaty after 36 years. Okay, it's fine for the satellites to break away, but it's not good for the people within the Soviet Union to break away. Anybody have people who came from Lithuania? You do. You do. Yeah, people was in, well, Lithuania wants out. They want out. It's March 11, 1990, and Lithuania declared that it was independent, the first of the Soviet republics to do so, but not quite yet. Gorbachev said, well, Poland, you can go. Czechoslovakia, you can go. But Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia, you're staying. Whether you like it, you're not going anywhere. Soviet government responded harshly to the Lithuanian Declaration of Independence, issued an ultimatum, renounce independence or face the consequences. Consequences, schmonsequences. On March 17, 1990, the Lithuanians gave their answer, rejecting the Soviet demand and asking the democratic nations grant them diplomatic recognition. The Soviets will attempt to crush the movement. But Lithuania wants out. They want out. They want to be independent. They want to be free of this guy, Joseph Stalin, who took them over in 1940. They became part of the Soviet Union then. Lithuania was the first of several Soviet republics to declare independence. On January 13th, Soviet troops, along with KGB intelligence agencies, stormed the Vilnius TV tower in Lithuania to suppress the independence movement. 14 unarmed civilians were killed, hundreds more injured. Many in the United States were horrified, and the U.S. Congress acted quickly to end economic assistance to the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was incensed by what the Americans did, but he was losing his power rapidly in the Soviet Union. On the night of July 31st, the Soviet military assaulted a Lithuanian border post, killed 7 Lithuanian servicemen. The event further weakened the Soviet Union's position internationally and domestically and stiffened the Lithuanian resistance. Lithuania would become free of the Soviet yoke within a few weeks. It's September 2nd, and they announced independence, and the United States says, we recognize you. September 6, 1991, Lithuania's independence was recognized by the State Council of the Soviet Union. The recognition of Lithuania's independence was quickly followed by several nations, including China and India. It's just about all over for the Soviet Union. On September 17th, Lithuania becomes a member of the United Nations. By some measures, the Soviet economy in 1990 was the second largest in the world. But shortages of consumer goods were routine. Not McDonald's though, right? And hoarding was commonplace. It was estimated that the Soviet black market was doing the equivalency of more than 10% of the country's gross domestic product. Vote to change. There's Gorbachev again. On March 17th, a referendum on the future of the Soviet Union is held. The idea is to transform the country into a federation of independent republics with broad autonomy. The proposal was approved, but 6 republics, Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania say no. And the first president of the Russian Federation is Boris Yeltsin. He's elected on June 12th. He gets 45 million votes, 57% of the vote go to him, well ahead of Nikolai Ruskov, who had the support of Gorbachev. He only got 16%. This was the first election in Russian history. Well, there is an attempted coup. The hardliners want their country back, and they want it back right now. So the attempted coup starts on August 18th. The hardliners from the Communist Party tried to remove Gorbachev from power. The move sent shockwaves around the world, which feared a rollback of the reforms and his efforts to end the Cold War. The push collapsed in 3 days. Throngs of people took to the streets in Moscow in defiance, and the people pushing the coup didn't have the military behind them. The Vice President, Yevgeny Yevgeniev, said he was taking over. He's the acting president. Russia's under the state of USSR is under a state of emergency, supported by an 8-member committee that includes the KGB, top military and police officers. Gorbachev was detained at his vacation home in the Crimea, said a spokesman for Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Republic. The attempted coup. He was held, he being Gorbachev, was held virtual prisoner. The State Committee ordered tanks and military vehicles onto the streets of Moscow, announced on television they had to take action because Gorbachev was ill and incapacitated. Some of the Republic's leaders went along with the coup. Others adopted a wait-and-see approach. A few declared the coup was unconstitutional. But the people spoke. The Russian Federation, President Boris Yeltsin, appealed to the armed forces, soldiers, officers, generals. The clouds of terror and dictatorship were gathering over the whole country. They must not be allowed to bring eternal night. He called for a general strike to thwart the State Emergency Committee, which announced it took over power. In Washington, Bush condemned the coup as illegitimate, said that U.S. economic aid would be halted if adherence to extra-constitutional means continues. The U.S. would avoid in every way possible actions that would lend legitimacy or support to the coup, demanding the reinstatement of Gorbachev, who is believed to be under house arrest. Britain suspended aid. Down with the Hunter. This is St. Petersburg, but it was called Leningrad in those days, and this says down with the Hunter. Coup is over quickly. The Soviet military's refusal to side with them over the protesters is a major part of it. After thousands took to the streets to demonstrate, the coup collapsed after 3 days. Gorbachev was released, flew to Moscow, but it was just about over for the Soviet Union. And here is his return to Moscow. Despite the coup, Gorbachev tried to persuade or preserve the Soviet Union in some form until the end of his rule, but most of the rulers of the Soviet republics believed that the Soviet Union was dead. This is Estonia. Looks like a fairyland, Estonia, but it's really cool because it looks like a movie set. This whole area in Estonia, Tallinn, Estonia. That's Estonia. They're out of there too. On September the 21st, the Congress of People's Deputies voted for the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Over the next few months, Gorbachev dissolved the Communist Party, granted independence to the Baltic states, proposed a looser, more economic-based federation among the remaining republics. In December, Gorbachev resigns. There is Lenin. That's a subway station in St. Petersburg with Lenin hanging over me. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was one of the most explosive political events of the 20th century. The violent revolution marked the end of the Romanov dynasty. I'm in this country because of the Tsar and his treatment of Jews, and centuries of Russian imperial rule. Vladimir Lenin seized power, destroyed the tradition of Tsarist rule. The Bolsheviks would later become the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. By December, after a 74-year run, the USSR is done. On December 8th, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus signed an agreement setting up the Commonwealth of Independent States. Gorbachev says goodbye. It's December 25th, which is not Christmas Day in the USSR. That's on January 6th. Gorbachev resigns as president. The U.S. recognized the independence of the remaining Soviet republics. On December 26th, the Russian government takes over the offices of the USSR in Moscow. Well, the Soviet flag is lowered for the final time. That is December 31st, or December 25th rather, at 7:32 p.m. Moscow time. And it comes down. The pre-revolutionary Russian flag of white, blue, and red takes its place. The Soviet Union is no more. The Soviet Union is a failed state. And, back in Estonia, the Golden Arches, McDonald's. McDonald's. Hey, the whole Cold War is over because of McDonald's? It's what they wanted, McDonald's. It's impossible to pinpoint what the single reason was for the collapse of the Soviet Union. Might have been Gorbachev's policies, could have been the economy, could have been the military fatigue factor after the occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s. But it just could have been people looking for something else, like going to McDonald's or going to Subway for a meal. It might have been as simple as that. Oh, that's me working back in 1991, interviewing Sparky Lyle of the New York Yankees. Had hair back then. The United States would invade Iraq in 2003. The Iraq War, also known as the Second Persian Gulf War, lasted 8 years. It was fought between the United States-led coalition and the Iraqi government. The United States would finally rid itself of Saddam Hussein, but problems in Iraq continue to this day. On April 29, 1992, on the 7th day of jury deliberations in the Rodney King beating trial, the jury acquitted all 4 officers of assault and acquitted 3 of the 4 of using excessive force. The jury could not agree on a verdict for the 4th officer charged with using excessive force. Tensions in Los Angeles exploded with 6 days of rioting. That is the Canterbury Hotel in Indianapolis. Spent some time in Indianapolis in 2000-2001. This is where the alleged rape of Desiree Washington took place. The Canterbury Hotel is on the National Register of Historic Places, but a lot of people in boxing know it because of Mike Tyson. On February 10, 1992, Tyson had been accused of raping the 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant, and he's found guilty by an Indiana jury. The following month, Tyson is given a 10-year sentence with 4 years suspended. Tyson returned to boxing recaptured the heavyweight title in 1996. Clarence Thomas would be confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, recently facing accusations of accepting gifts from people who have had cases tried before the court. Michael Jordan won 6 championships during his career. He was a pitchman for sneakers, underwear, and sports drink. Magic Johnson's career was over. Well, not really. A few months after his announcement, he played for the United States Dream Team in the Barcelona Olympics in 1992. He returned to the Lakers as a player. He became a businessman and part owner of professional sports franchises. I'll be back. Hasta la vista, baby. Arnold Schwarzenegger became the California governor. He became the California governor. Why? Because he was a movie star. Ronald Reagan was a California governor. George Murphy was a California senator. Sonny Bono was the mayor of Palm Springs. Americans dote on celebrity. Arnold Schwarzenegger announced his candidacy for the governor of California during the recall vote on an episode of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. It might have been a joke. On October 7th, 2003, he beats the incumbent governor, Gray Davis. He gets 55.4% of the vote. Let's replace the governor, and he gets 48.6% of the vote to become the governor. Hasta la vista, baby, temporarily on Arnold's career. That is my wife, and we are over in Montenegro there. Albania's Communist Party was routed in 1992 elections amid an economic collapse and social unrest. While the Democratic Party was winning most seats, its party head Sali Berisha becoming the president. Albania joined NATO in 2009, aiming to join the European Union. Montenegro became a country as well. Oh, your tax dollars at work. These are your tax dollars at work. This is me speaking at the George Bush Presidential Library in College Station, Texas, back in 2007. A State Department job, talking to 16 foreign nationals about how sports and government operates in this country. 3 Russians, 3 Indonesians, 3 Nigerians, 3 Turks, 3 Venezuelans, 1 Canadian, and 4 United States citizens. George H.W. Bush was defeated in his re-election bid by Bill Clinton in 1992. Only incumbents defeated in the 20th century: William Howard Taft, Herbert Hoover, and Gerald Ford. And that is Vladimir Putin. The Soviet Union fractured into 15 separate countries or republics. The present Russian president, Vladimir Putin, started a war with a former part of the USSR, Ukraine, in 2022. The Russian government today remains at odds with the United States and Western countries. Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments? It is your turn to talk.
It was a good reminder of everything that went on.